G'day cocktail lovers, this is my take on a drink I found called an Absinthe Negroni, and my blue absinthe has made it a really gnarly and somewhat unappealing colour, but in terms of taste, this is genuinely good. I really like how that tastes. And now I'll just give you a little bit of background. Anyone who watches me regularly will not be surprised to learn I've done a bit of improvising with this recipe. But also, anyone who watches me regularly will be a bit surprised to hear I'm making a Negroni. Notoriously, I just can't handle Campari. It's too bitter, even in small amounts. I simply don't like it. I've found some substitutes, particularly a couple that are made locally, that are just nice and lightly bitter, and I'll use them. But this recipe, besides catching my eye by being called an Absinthe Negroni, also doesn't use Campari, so you know, I'm on board. My biggest improvisation is the amount of absinthe. I looked at the recipe and it was just an absinthe rinse, and I was like, come on! You can't call a drink an Absinthe Negroni and only do an absinthe rinse. So I'm like putting like 1/4 of an ounce in there. There's absinthe in here. I should also specify, this is not dissing the bartender who created it. Sarah Morrissey from New York, way better bartender than I'll ever be. I also did try her eggnog recipe in the lead up to Christmas. So basically, she knows what she's doing, but just for me, for fun, I just thought, if I'm gonna call it an Absinthe Negroni, it's gonna have absinthe in it. Sarah's recipe said to use a lighter, bitter aperitivo than Campari, so I'm on board. I used this because I don't have what she had. This is a locally made one from a maker called St. Felix. Their bitter citrus aperitivo. This is about equivalent to Aperol, so that's going in. Another interesting bit of this recipe, besides the no Campari and besides the absinthe, is it substitutes this little beauty here, mezcal, in place of gin. I'm just going, that's going to be different. That's going to be a very different drink. And also, it's got a little bit of white creme to cacao in it, which I thought, okay, so this is going to be sweeter than a normal, what do we call it? A Negroni. Should I cut that out on editing? I think people might be used to me stumbling over words from now. Okay, you know what? The magic of editing. Those are all the components to go in there, and they do come together really well, in my opinion. And yeah, if you're not really heavily into absinthe like I am, then an absinthe rinse will probably just add a really interesting note to it. But here's how we make it. In a mixing glass, we put 45 mils or 1.5 ounces of mezcal, then 1 ounce or 30 mils of sweet vermouth. Add to that 3/4 of an ounce, around 22.5 mils of your bitter red aperitivo. And then we're adding 1/4 of an ounce of white creme de cacao, it's about 7.5 mils. And for me, I'm doing the same amount, 1/4 of an ounce or 7.5 mils of absinthe. Add ice to your glass, stir that for 20 to 25 seconds to chill and dilute the drink, and then strain that into a chilled Nicanora glass, and I'm garnishing that with maraschino cherry on a skewer. After I made it and it went this sort of, I don't know, dirty puddle color, I thought, you know what, I have another absinthe that's lighter flavor-wise than this one, which is 80% ABV, and it's not bright blue, so it would have been a more visually appealing one. Oh well, for the future, I'll keep that in mind. I think this has come together really well, and I think the amount of absinthe I put in there is a good counterbalance to the smokiness of the mezcal. It's just basically come together really well. I much prefer this to a Campari Negroni. I certainly have no problem with gin, but you know, I do like to experiment, and can't say it often enough. If you find something that sounds good, but you don't have the exact ingredients, just experiment, do substitutions, work out something, and just work out what works for you. And I hope things generally are working for you. I hope you're keeping well. I do hope to see you again soon. Until such time as I do, I will say cheers.